Hi, I'm Vanessa from speakenglishwithvanessa.com. Today I have a special surprise for you. You're going to see a conversation between myself and the real live English guys. We had a conversation on Google Hangouts, and I want to show you what we had to say today about politics and understanding each other and becoming a global citizen. You're going to learn some new expressions and some tips for how we can open our minds to understand people who are pretty different from ourselves. And you're also going to see why Facebook is not helping the situation of people understanding each other. Let's take a look at this conversation video together. And if you would like to listen to the podcast episode, you can click on the link in the description below and listen to their podcast version of this video. Let's get started.
Yeah, global citizens, this is Justin from Real Life English, from Real Life English Podcast. We believe that listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos is a fun, natural, convenient, and
spectacular
and
fabulous
way to learn English. To download this podcast or watch this video now while listening and watching, and
while giving a massage to your elderly grandmother,
or
while skydiving,
or playing soccer. So today we are joined in the studio or across the internet, our guest from the United States, teacher Vanessa. How are you doing today, Vanessa?
Oh, I'm doing great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here. Awesome to have you here. So today we are trying something new. We are recording and we are broadcasting on YouTube through Teacher Vanessa's channel. So this is, you can go to Teacher Vanessa on YouTube. We will put the link in the show notes in our podcast, and you can go watch this live, check out her YouTube channel. And today, for the intro, we're going to talk a little bit about that, talk about Vanessa, and then we're going to move on to global communication and talk about all the awesome things there is to talk about with that. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, that's a huge question, but for this audience, hi everyone, I'm Vanessa, and I've been teaching English in the world in various places, France, the US, Korea, for the past 7 years or so. And within the last 2 years, I decided that the internet is the best way to go. So I've been teaching online for about 2 years, and it's awesome. It's a great way to connect with people all around the world. And at the moment, I don't live in Brazil like you guys. I live on the East Coast of the US. So that's probably where I'm gonna live for the next couple years. But so far, so good. The internet is a great way to kind of pretend like you're traveling when you're not always in another country. So hopefully that will work for everyone out there as well too.
That's the beautiful thing about the internet. You can connect via Skype or via another video connection and speak with people all around the world, traveling thousands of miles, right?
communicate globally.
Yeah. So your YouTube channel, I just see that you are kicking ass. You're publishing these great videos, teaching people English in dynamic new ways, helping people develop confidence. So I'm really impressed. So what's your focus on your YouTube channel?
Well, so far my focus for YouTube is, well, actually this goes back to what we're going to talk about today, but I'll focus on just your question first of all. On YouTube so far is to help people gain confidence, to learn what we as native English speakers use instead of focusing on more textbook style grammar or pronunciation or vocabulary that I think a lot of people learned in school and didn't really have much success with in the real world. So it's trying to focus on using that in a real way confidently. So hopefully that is being successful so far.
So how does one develop confidence in their learning process?
Well, confidence, I feel like, is a mindset shift. So first of all, we have to be okay with making mistakes. because that's just part of life. We're always going to make mistakes. So when you make a mistake, first of all, being okay with it, being nice to yourself and realizing, hey, it's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. This is something that's normal and necessary. And it means that you're learning. It means that you're doing something to progress instead of just staying where you are. So being okay with making mistakes. And I think a big part of confidence is being in a community with other people who are doing something similar. So that's why I try to do a lot of live events and try to encourage people to leave comments and YouTube videos, and in courses and Facebook groups, trying to really encourage people to communicate and connect with each other, because that's when you realize that, oh, I make a mistake, but they do too. So it's okay. This is something that we're just doing together and successfully communicating still, even though it's not perfect yet. So that's something that helps you feel better about yourself when you're with other people.
Absolutely. I would say that's it's a beautiful insight into both language learning and life in general, right? You just have to get going. Not be paralyzed. I think people get paralyzed at the beginning, like, oh, I have to be perfect before I can actually start. But if you keep doing that, you learn and you forget. You never really actually learn how to use what you've been learning from the textbook.
Yeah, and I think as adults, that's a hard thing, because maybe kids feel more comfortable making mistakes because they haven't had a lifetime of kind of that negative attitude about mistakes, like big red marks on your paper. Kids haven't really experienced that yet, but as adults, we've had more negative experiences with mistakes, and usually it's not real world negative experience. It's just school negative experience, where if you tried to say those things in the real world, no one is going to say, why didn't you say that correctly? It's not a big deal. But in school, there's a lot of negativity about making mistakes and trying to be perfect. So I think we have to kind of relearn that it's okay, be nice to yourself, and just try to follow the path that's going to be more natural and help you to enjoy learning and enjoy making mistakes too.
I think too, like with the thing is that it's a language, and the problem with that is that we compare it to our native language. And so people, because they speak their native language so easily, they expect that when they speak English, they want to also have that same level. But it's very, very difficult to get to that, because you have to think that you grew up with your native language. You have had so many hours just like speaking it as a child, you know, playing around with the language. And it's like with English, you probably work or you study or something, and you don't have that same amount of time you can dedicate to learning it.
Yeah.
But I think people, when they're learning something else, they're learning martial arts or sports or art or anything, they expect that there's going to be mistakes and roadblocks and stuff. But for some reason, when they learn languages, I think because they're comparing it to their first language, that they don't have that same comfort.
Wait, what does roadblock mean, Ethan?
A roadblock is like a barrier, something that's in the way.
That blocks the road, right? A roadblock.
Yeah. That you put up for construction or something like that.
So we need to break down the roadblocks, drive like a crazy person and push them away, at least metaphorically.
Awesome. So moving into today's main focus, which is everything to do with confidence and communication and having courage, is global communication. Today we wanted to talk a little bit about global communication and us as 3 Americans. This is why Chad's not in here, because you have to have an American passport to be in this podcast today. Recently we elected a new president, and there's a lot of controversy around this, and it really brings up a lot of questions about communication on a national and an international scale. So we decided that this is an excellent topic for today's podcast. So what is it to be a global communicator? Ethan?
That's a really big question. It's like the big question you gave to Vanessa before. So global communication, I mean, I think at the fundamental level of it, it is communicating across cultures. So someone who is able to communicate globally is going to be able to meet people from any part of the world and be able to talk to them in a non-judgmental way looking beyond the stereotypes that they might have about that person. Like, for example, if you go to France, you're not going to assume that everyone there is going to be rude, or that everyone there like sitting around drinking wine and eating cheese. Or if you come to Brazil, you're not going to assume everyone here loves soccer and samba and that they live in the Amazon. So it's kind of like coming with a more open perspective, and curiosity, I think, is really important too. Like wanting to learn beyond just the superficial level that you have coming from your background.
Excellent insight. We're constantly changing our mind. This is what we talked about in the past, the growth mindset, being open to growing, being open to evolving your perspective and also your skills and your ability with not just English, but the way you look at the world. So
and that can be really difficult to do because you've grown up with your background. You've been hearing your whole life that your culture is right, that your religion is right, that whatever background you come from, that's basically what you've been hearing is right all your life. So it's like suddenly, if you're introduced to global communication, you talk to people from other cultures, you might see, oh, maybe this isn't right, which means that I'm wrong, which means that I have to change. And that's uncomfortable. A lot of times we're like, no, like that's just wrong. It's more comfortable to stay where I am. But you have to break out of that bubble and get out of your comfort zone and be willing to be curious and open your mind to new perspectives that might be different than what you know, but they're going to help you to become just much better as a person, as a global citizen.
The role of empathy. The role of empathy is really important. So a lot of times you hear somebody and they'll speak, and maybe you don't agree with them, but you won't even listen. So we don't have to agree with them to really understand the perspective. So it's really important for us to really put ourselves in their shoes, to really put ourselves in their place. There's a quote I really like by Aristotle that says, the mark of an educated mind is the ability to accept a thought or an idea understand a thought.
Understand a thought, entertain a thought?
Entertain a thought, sorry. Entertain a thought without accepting it.
What does entertain mean in this case? Because people probably know entertain like watching your favorite TV show.
Yeah, so entertain means to consider the thought and to understand the thought and to be able to even represent that thought and communicate to that thought, to that person.
It seems like when we hear other people's opinions, we have to not talk and we can't give our judgment or our opinion about it. And that is so hard. So when you are an educated mind or open-minded thinker, you have to keep your opinion to yourself, first of all, and just listen to the other person. And I think a lot of people want to just change someone else's mind immediately, tell you what I think, and this is my opinion. So to really change someone's mind or to connect with someone, you have to have some common ground first. So to just say your opinion right away and judge what they said is going to cause some tension that is going to be really difficult to get rid of when you actually want to really open your mind and try to talk about your opinions. You're kind of negating what you want to say to them because you didn't give them a chance to speak in the first place. So listening is important.
Yeah, there's a great phrase. It's like, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them accordingly, which means that like, you should listen twice as much as you speak. And there's like another principle that is, a lot of times, like what Vanessa was just saying, is that we're listening to someone, but we're not actually listening. We're just listening to respond. And especially if someone has different opinions, we're just listening to be like, okay, what can I say to like change their mind? Even though when you start getting into that sort of communication, which is definitely not global communication, then you're just kind of creating a larger and larger divide, because you're going to say, no, I'm right, you're wrong. And the other person is, then they're going to want to defend themselves instead of listening to you. They're going to say, no, you're wrong. And then it's like it just gets to be this huge barrier in between you, a big roadblock goes up.
So I think
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the next question, especially for English learners, is that's a really high skill language thing to be able to listen, but also use the correct words to not show judgment on their opinion. So if someone told me something that I completely don't agree with, if I want to be an open-minded global thinker, I have to carefully choose my words so that I don't directly judge what they're saying. And I think that's something that maybe for English learners, they might find difficult at the beginning in English, trying to be able to use the right words to be empathetic and to be open-minded. So I'm just wondering for your advice, what kind of sentences or what kind of language, if I told you something that you just thought was absolutely not your opinion, something crazy, how would you react to that in a empathetic way or in an open-minded way?
I can see where you're coming from, Vanessa, but
Or that's interesting, but
or you can identify, summarize their point of view, right? And then have your point of view too.
yeah, it's always good too, because like you kind of restate what they're saying, which that means that like you've really understood it. It means you were actually listening, and then they might actually hear the interpretation you got, and they might say, "Oh no, that's not actually what I meant." So you're not actually starting a fight. You're helping them see like maybe they didn't communicate what they were trying to say correctly.
Yeah, I think that works really well. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I think there's a delay. I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was wrong there to interrupt you.
That's a great one. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that works really well also with just general relationships, or I've used that a lot with kids. If a kid is trying to, like kids that I babysit, if they're trying to do something crazy, like, oh, I want to, I don't know, go outside and run around without any clothes on, and it's the middle of winter. If I just, like you said, repeat back what they said, oh, you want to run outside without any clothes in the winter, how will you feel? Then you're kind of opening the door for them to think about it. And even with, you know, my husband, if I do that kind of thing, that active listening where you're repeating back, it shows, yes, I understood exactly what you wanted, or no, I didn't understand. So can you explain it in a different way? That's a really good way to kind of open the door for better communication.
Mm-hmm. So let's address the elephant in the room.
What's the elephant in the room?
The elephant in the room is the big idea that nobody wants to mention, but that everybody's thinking about.
It's kind of like something uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. And so everybody's always asking us, like, what the heck? Or WTF? What the heck happened?
What is wrong with you Americans?
What happened to America, right? So Vanessa, do you want to lead on this one?
Oh man, okay, just go right in. So the question is, why did Donald Trump win? And that's the elephant in the room, I guess we're talking about here. And no matter what I think politically, I think it's a lot more complex than the media tries to portray it. So the typical narrative of why Donald Trump won, I think a lot of people in the US, and the reason why there's a lot of protests is because a lot of Americans are racist or sexist, or, you know, want to be this certain kind of person and not these other people who are not like me. I think that's the stereotype of why he won. But in my opinion, I think a lot of people voted for Donald Trump defensively. So they voted against Hillary instead of voting for Donald Trump. And that means that everyone, I think probably in every country, probably your country too, that they try to find the lesser of two evils.
What does that mean?
Well, the lesser of two evils. Evil means really bad, something that's terrible. So we've got two terrible choices, and you're trying to find who is a little bit less terrible. And it's not like you've got a great choice, but who's a little less terrible. And I think that's a terrible position to be in. Of course, I want to vote for someone who I can be confident in and who's going to be a great leader. But instead, we're voting for the person who's going to hurt the country the least. And I think a lot of people felt, at least the friends who I saw on my Facebook feed, a lot of those friends felt really negative and just icky about voting because they didn't feel passionate about the person they were voting for. They just felt like, well, the other person is a little bit worse. So in conclusion to that idea, I think that even though Donald Trump won, and there are, of course, the people who you see at rallies and people cheering for him, there are supporters, but I think that a lot of people who voted for him just didn't trust Hillary Clinton. So instead of loving Donald Trump, they just really didn't like her, and he's the only other option. So that's kind of my first opinion. I don't know, what do you guys think about that?
First, I'd say you said icky, which might be a hard word for some people.
Yes, icky is, I wouldn't say it's slang, but it means gross or disgusting. Sometimes, like one of my friends posted on Facebook that voting was like going to the dentist. They just felt terrible, like, oh, this is not fun. It should be some kind of like freedom and I'm choosing my own leader, but they just felt like they were going to the dentist, something terrible that they have to do to, plan for the future or whatever. So I think icky is that feeling like, ugh, I don't want to do it, but I have to do it.
Yeah, I wanted to I don't know, just put some of this in perspective for people who don't really understand the system in the US, because if you're coming from a country, for example, like Brazil, it's also a federal government. So it's kind of similar to how it works in the US, but here you have obligatory voting. So you have to vote or you pay a fine if you don't vote. So like everyone goes, whether or not they care, whether or not they're educated about it, everyone votes. In the US, it is not. You vote if you want to, if you feel motivated to. And another thing that I think is important is that it's because the US is federal, a lot of people come from a democracy that is a parliament, which means that you can vote for a smaller party and your vote still matters because you can get like a representative in the parliament from a smaller party. In the US, it's really just, although there are other candidates, it's a two-party system. So something that happened in this election is it's the biggest ever vote for a third party, but it was still only something like 5%. So that's also, I think that's something very unfortunate in the US. We really only have like two choices. And like Vanessa was saying, a lot of people was like, okay, well, I'm choosing the lesser of two evils. Or because there's not a mandatory vote, a lot of people, it was just like, I don't care. They're both awful. I'm not going to vote. I just prefer not to vote. So, and I knew a lot of people who were like this. They said, I don't really care either way. So, I mean, we're screwed either way. And so they did not vote, which, it's a shame. It's kind of like the whole purpose of democracy is like, let's go and choose. But when there's two terrible choices, that's what's going to happen. So it's not necessarily that a humongous population in the US supports Donald Trump or that they really didn't support Hillary. It was really that a lot of people just did not care. The people who cared the most were probably Trump supporters. And so that could be another explanation for why he might have won.
I have a big question for you. Do you mind if I ask you something really big? So why do you think that we ended up with two people who a lot of people in the US just feel are icky? That instead of having someone, like a lot of people felt really passionate about Obama and they wanted to vote for him, but it seems like a lot of people really didn't like either candidate. So how do you think we ended up with these two people?
Let's talk about Bernie Sanders, right? Bernie Sanders was the Democratic candidate for Hillary Clinton before. So they can only pick one candidate. And the Democratic Party actually really wanted him to run against Trump, even though Bernie was just amazingly famous and everybody loved him. And he had a really great campaign and he was very passionate. And a lot of people are saying now, I told you so. I told you so to the Democratic Party because they pushed him out.
So you think that maybe because they pushed out Bernie, that Bernie supporters didn't vote for Hillary, or they just didn't feel passionate about her because she pushed out the guy that they like?
I think that definitely contributed to it, but I just think it just represents how bad the system is in general.
Mm.
I just don't think she's nearly as charismatic as Bernie is. And Bernie was like this hyper liberal, people called him a socialist candidate. And some people that I heard that I respect, some thinkers, believed that they were really pushing for Hillary because they thought that Hillary would beat Trump and this other guy couldn't beat Trump because he's too liberal for the United States.
And that's an
But-
interesting point about the two-party system, because if we had more parties that were given more voice or more airtime, like they were allowed to have a voice in the debates or something like this, if we had that option, maybe Bernie could have been, or even other Republicans instead of Trump, or other third-party candidates could have been on the ballot, on the voting choices, instead of just two candidates. Why did he have to completely leave? Why couldn't Bernie still have been there? I think that might be a flaw in the system, that people who wanted to vote for Bernie should have been given the opportunity to still do that if they wanted to.
But the system is
Sure.
rigged. I don't think that
It's rigged.
What does rigged mean?
Rigged means it's like it's been set up to be in the advantage of a certain person's interests
Or certain
group of people.
Yeah, a certain group of people. So it's like
Yeah.
Bernie was just a really passionate, great candidate that I think the rest of the world would have loved. But
The rest of the world, like the world as a whole, or the rest of the world, like the rest of Americans?
well, the world as a whole,
Okay.
I refer to. I don't think America is a world, but
Something too that's like I've had pointed out by my friends from Europe is that in the U.S., like we think of someone like Bernie Sanders as being socialist, or a lot of people called him like a socialist, which also in the U.S. I think a lot of people compare that with being like communist. And actually, like compared to most countries in Europe, in the U.S., like even our Democratic Party, which is supposed to be our liberal party, for them would be a conservative party. So it's kind of like interesting to look at it. It is also a very conservative country politically.
Yeah, I'm curious, do you think that Bernie Sanders could have beaten Donald Trump in another alternate reality if he had been the only other candidate with Donald Trump? What do you think, in your opinion?
I think that one of the problems that Hillary had, what we were talking about before, is that she was not able to rally up to get support from, for example, minorities and from young people, which I think that's why one of the reasons that Obama was able to win. He got all these people who normally would not vote, like, generally people who are from minorities and who are young, they don't vote anyway because they don't feel like their vote's going to matter, like they're going to be represented. But Obama all of a sudden came in and he felt like a hero for the minorities, for the young people. He really campaigned on social media. He went to universities and spoke. Like, actually, Michelle Obama came to my university and I got to see her right in front of my where I was living speak. So they did a wonderful job of that. Hillary did not. She tried, but she's not exactly someone who sticks out as like a hero for the young people, for the minorities, for the normal common man. So I think Bernie, maybe he could have been able to do that. I think young people really loved him. I think that he was Jewish as well, which is a minority. He would have been, if he could have gotten elected, he would have been the first Jewish president. And so I think he definitely would have been much more of an opposing force for Hillary.
I think another thing, like what you mentioned about Bernie being, he was interesting to the minorities or to demographics that don't usually get spoken to. I think something about this election is that it was quite an outsider election. Like, Donald Trump is not a politician. He's a billionaire, but he's technically an outsider in the political sphere. He doesn't have all of the political connections that someone like Hillary Clinton has. So if Donald Trump is an outsider, kind of, and Bernie Sanders is kind of an outsider, he's talking to the people who aren't just typical politicians, that if those two people are who the majority or a lot of Americans can get passionate about right now. And then we've got Hillary Clinton, who is a very typical politician. It seems like this just wasn't her time to win, because it was a time when people wanted an outsider. They wanted something different, who's not a typical politician. And she doesn't really fit that bill.
What does that mean?
Fit that bill. Well, I don't really know where this expression originated, but what was my sentence? I said that Hillary Clinton doesn't fit that bill. So she doesn't fit that type of person. She's not an outsider. She's a political insider, we could say. She knows all about the workings of the political system, and she's connected to everyone. So she fits that type of person. She fits that bill. Would you explain that expression any differently? I'm not sure exactly if I said that well.
I think that's a great explanation, at least in this case. I think too, like talking about that too, I think Trump, on the other hand, he fit the bill perfectly for the people who voted for him, because he was so different. He's not typical politician. He was fighting for the working man who, you know, in the economic crisis lost his job or whatever, lost a lot of things. There's actually, the other day we were watching an interesting talk from what's the guy's name again?
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Michael Moore.
Oh,
Not Leonardo DiCaprio. Michael Moore talking. He predicted, like, months before the election, even though he didn't support Donald Trump, he predicted that Donald Trump would win because he got people so riled up. What does riled up mean?
Riled up means like just emotionally agitated. Right?
Yeah, he was able to like really get the masses on the right side really riled up. So, you know, if you're able to do that, even if it's just one side, they're going to be the people who go out and fight for, you know, their choice and go out and vote. Hillary was kind of white bread. She was nothing new, like Vanessa was saying. Another politician who's taking money from lobbyists. What are lobbyists?
Lobbyists are people who ask the government to give them favors. They give politicians lots of money and say, hey, can you make a law that says I can grow as much corn as I want without any taxes if I give you $3 million? And they are getting favors.
Yeah, they're the ones from the corporations that are basically going out and like talking to the politicians to create those really corrupt relationships.
Yeah.
You know. Okay, so it's a great conversation. We have explained a lot, to be honest with you. A lot of the things that we're talking about today about understanding the other side, maybe I haven't done the best job of understanding Trump supporters. I didn't vote, actually, being in Brazil, but yeah, so I probably would have voted for Hillary, but I did not do the best job of actually understanding the other perspective. And so it's really hard for me maybe to come in there and have a complete perspective of the Trump side of things. So, but let me ask you guys this question. How can we, and how can the people out there listening to this, English learners, how can they be more global communicators, better global communicators? What are some tips at the end of this?
I think it could be useful to search for something that is different from your own opinion. And talking about politics, one recommendation is there is a Facebook page called Humans of New York. And if you're curious about why in the world did Donald Trump win, the Facebook page, the photographer, it's a photography page. He interviews people and takes their picture. He's going to an area in Michigan that has, I think, always voted Democrat. And then this election, they voted Republican. So he's going to go there and not really ask them political questions, but just ask them questions about life, see what kind of people they are. So he's putting a face to the idea so that we can maybe become less stereotypical about thinking Donald Trump supporters are like this, Hillary supporters are like this. You can see who the real people are. So if you don't agree with the vote outcome, this could be a good way to kind of see real people and see that, hey, we're all humans. We're just have our different perspectives about what is the best thing for the future.
In this article that we all read, that I really recommend you read, if If you haven't yet, it's in the comments, in the information box below. But they talk about something called the contact hypothesis. And this is to really reduce your prejudice, expand your perspective through extended contact with people that have different backgrounds, people that think differently than you, people that have different opinions, different cultures. So the more that you do that, the more that you, just like this Humans of New York page is doing, you systematically expand your perspective and are able to look at the world from different perspectives, from different point of view.
Yeah, so maybe contacting people who are from different cultures, finding a speaking partner, or talking on Skype with someone who's different, or listening, even if it's just in the YouTube comments. If someone says something you don't agree with, instead of just judging immediately and saying your opinion to them, but asking them some questions. Oh, why do you think that? What would happen if that was a reality? Or asking some open questions instead of just immediately judging. Like you said, having contact with people who are of different mindsets, because we often put ourselves in a bubble instead of reaching people who are different from ourselves, because like the quote I mentioned earlier, it makes us feel healthy, or it makes us feel normal when we surround ourselves by people who are similar to ourselves. So it's not easy to reach and contact people who are different, but like you're mentioning, it helps to reduce prejudice when we contact people who are different. So kind of necessary for unifying the world, really, for being global communicators.
Mm-hmm. I think it can help you to grow a lot too as a person. It's like there's the quote, I think it's Jim Rohn, that said, "You are the 5 people you spend the most time with." And although this is kind of like in a business setting, to surround yourself by people who are maybe a level ahead, or like, at the level where you would like to be from a business point of view. I think this also works in this setting too. Surround yourself by people who force you to grow. And like, if you surround yourself by people who have different points of views than you, you're going to be forced to like understand many different ways of looking at the world.
Yeah, I'm curious, how do you guys feel whenever somebody questions what you think? So if you said, like you mentioned earlier, if I had voted, I would have voted maybe for Hillary, maybe for Bernie, just one of those choices. If someone said, oh, why would you do that? How would you instinctively feel about that? Or how would you react to that kind of question when your judgment is on the line? Someone is questioning your ideas. How would you feel about that?
It depends too, right? If they're saying like, oh, why do you think that? Or if they're saying, why do you think that? If they're coming from like a judgmental or like an understanding point of view. But I think just even when it's you're communicating your ideas, you can do it with such a way that you're like open to whatever they're going to respond to that. So, trying to say it in a non-aggressive sort of communicative way.
Sure, like what we were talking about, that nonviolent communication or active listening, actually trying to repeat back what the other person said, so that when we do have contact with people who are different than ourselves, we can actually benefit from that instead of just clashing and fighting, or just feeling even stronger about our own opinions instead of opening our minds. So yeah, those are good ideas.
And it's like a basic human right, like freedom to opinion, freedom of speech. So it's basically like, look, at this other person is entitled to his or her opinions. Does not mean I have to agree with them, but I can listen, I can try to understand them, and I can respectfully disagree.
Another thing we can do, besides engaging with people who are different than us and really trying to understand their perspectives, research the things that they believe, we can also examine the information sources that we believe in and the information sources that we share. Because a lot of times you see posts on Facebook that are clickbait.
What's clickbait?
Clickbait is basically something that you put on a fishing hook to go fishing, right? So the fish is attracted to it, and it attracts the fish for you to capture it. So clickbait is a really fancy, beautiful title of an article that people will click on.
10 ways why Donald Trump will ruin the world.
It sort of confirms what we believe, and so it gets people really emotional and engaged in Facebook, but it doesn't necessarily represent like qualified content. So it's really good for us to question the information that we're consuming, the information that we are sharing too. Because if you share information that's not the best quality, then you're spreading those lies too.
Yeah, I think something valuable in order to know if the material you're reading is biased, like what we talked about before, what's the reason why the author is writing that? Do they have some kind of desire to get you to think something for a specific reason? So a way we can find out if an article or a journalist or a news broadcaster is biased is if they use sources. So this is something I often look for when I read a news article. When they say a percent, like 50% of Hillary supporters say this or think this, or if they say last week Donald Trump said that he wants to do this. Well, if there is, especially on the computer, on the internet, it's so easy to have an annotation to say, click here so that you can see the original source. And you can really see, did Donald Trump say that? Did Hillary supporters really say that? You can follow those, but a lot of articles don't use that kind of content. They don't really try to support their own opinions with facts. So be sure to look for some kind of facts in the articles instead of just saying them. Look for other sources. I think that's a valuable thing to do.
Definitely. Especially because like even sometimes they do share like the video or whatever, but maybe it's taken out of context. So it makes it sheds the wrong kind of light on it.
Sheds the light?
Yeah. So shed light is to like provide information. So it kind of like gives you an idea that, oh, Trump said this, and they show you like a video of Trump saying such and such offensive thing. But then maybe if you went and saw the original video, maybe not, it would actually provide context and be like, oh, okay, it makes sense that he said that.
But probably not with Trump, because Trump is
unpredictable.
He says a lot of really bad things.
Yeah, I think it's also to keep in mind too why someone might say something. So even for my own family, if someone says something kind of hurtful to me, because I know them intimately, I know their background, I know like if they had a bad day that day, I can sympathize or I can be a little gentler about accepting their harsh words. So thinking about what's their motivation for saying that thing, even in relationships around us, or what's Hillary or Donald Trump's motivation for saying certain things? Is it just to win the election? Is it actually because they believe that? And trying to dig down and find the original motivation for why somebody said that, even just in relationships around us, not just politics.
That's an excellent point. And it reminds me of one thing I'm going to say. I'm not sure how politically correct it is, but just this idea of Donald Trump he's a businessman. And if you look at his elections communication, he uses a lot of like repetition. He's kind of constantly repeating a lot of the same words, the same phrases, the simple communication, and really, really poking at the emotions of people. And
What
there's
does
some people
poking mean?
poking. If you're watching the YouTube video, you can see me poking Ethan. It means to press your finger on something. So
or like a sharp, sometimes it's even with like a sharp object.
Kind of annoying something.
He's agitating the emotions of the people, right? And so I've read sources, actually like verified sources, that say that he's been trained in I'll find one of these articles and post it in the show notes.
Make sure it's verified.
That he's actually been trained in hypnosis. And so in some sense, he might be hypnotizing using techniques of hypnosis in his marketing.
And I think those are all things too that when you are knowledgeable about it or when you're aware of it, even if you don't end up changing your mind about the final outcome, you still can see things a little clearer. So you can know why he said certain things or why people, even for Bernie Sanders, why people really liked Bernie Sanders or why people are doing things when you know their background. I mean, Donald Trump wrote the book the art of the deal. He knows about how to get people to do what he wants. So it's not that that is a lack of knowledge on his part, but certainly it's a completely different tactic than what other politicians have used before. So very different.
What's a tactic?
A tactic is like his strategy. His strategy for getting people to vote for him is, it seems similar, but at the same time, it's not. Like, a lot of politicians use crazy language, or they try to make the voters feel fear. Like, oh, I have to vote for this person because if I don't, the world will explode, terrible things will happen. So they use fear. But I think for Donald Trump, his unique tactic was, for better or for worse, was saying a lot of unpredictable things, but being very bold about it. So not saying things that were only politically correct. And I think a lot of people in America wanted somebody who's not just going to say the perfect Republican or Democratic things, even though he does say a lot of crazy things. We'll see what he actually does.
Yeah, I think just like something that bothered me slightly about that message from Trump, and I think this is interesting on a global scale, not to like push any opinions that I have, but just the campaign, the Make America Great Again, and that whole thing that, like, a lot of people feel like America is not a great country, which I think if you actually spend time outside of America and you see a bit how the world is, the US is a pretty great country already in its current state. So just something I think that is important to put out there is kind of like how part of having a global perspective is realizing, like, you know, things here are pretty good, or just putting it into a global point of view of like where you are at and being grateful.
Yeah, that's a really great expression too, to put things in perspective when you experience other cultures. Or recently I read 3 books, a century trilogy about the last 100 years in the US, and not just in the US, but in the world. About, the first one was World War I, then World War II, then the 60s through 80s. And this has just changed my perspective so much about our current state of life. Maybe there's things I complain about, but when I put that in perspective and think about the last 100 years, wow, I'm talking to you on Skype right now. This is incredible. This is new technology I should be grateful for. So putting things in perspective is really important too, for just connecting and being satisfied too.
Oh, yeah. Well, I hope we've been able to come on here and give you guys some perspective today. It's been really great sharing this microphone with you, Vanessa, and you too, Ethan. Thanks a lot for coming today, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope this was beneficial to people for learning English and just the world, developing and thinking about the world in general.
Where can people find you?
The best place is my website, speakenglishwithvanessa.com.
Speakenglishwithvanessa.com. Oh, yeah.
All right. One more oh yeah to close it off. 1, 2, 3.
Oh,
yeah.
That was nice. Oh, yeah. Good job. All right, guys. Take care.
Have a good one.
The next step is to download my free ebook, 5 Steps to Becoming a Confident English Speaker. This will help you know what is the next step in your English journey to help you really master English and speak fluently. Feel free to subscribe so that you get a notification every time there's a new English lesson. Thanks so much, and I'll see you later. Bye.